Well, guys, the day has finally come. Today, we are privileged to be sitting down with two men who are making huge waves throughout the alien and UFO research community. The first is investigative journalist, activist, and filmmaker Jeremy Corbell, the man behind the upcoming documentary we're talking about today. And the other is a man that most of you have only heard whispers about over the past 30 or so years. A man that, among other things, brought the very existence of Area 51 to light and is said to have actually worked on recovered alien craft at the secretive military base, Mr. Bob Lazar. Gentlemen, it's an honor to have you both here. Thank you for coming on today, and we really appreciate it. Millions of people appreciate this.
Thanks so much.
Thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man.
Well, as well, I'm sure you know, Jeremy, many of the audience members, my audience members, have commented that they didn't think this day would ever come. Bob, you have become sort of a UFO legend and icon over the years, and especially to the younger generations of people curious about the UFO topic. Because the world wanted it, and now it's here finally, we have this definitive documentary on your life. So the first thing I want to ask you both is, was this a smooth process creating this film?
Boy, that's a tough question. It was a long, arduous process, and clearly much more difficult for Jeremy than for me.
Yeah, I don't know if that's true. I mean, Bob, lived, this, experience for 30 years. So I don't know who's more difficult for, but I think that the joke in it all is, no, it's not been a totally smooth road. Bob has, he didn't ask me to make a movie. I begged him to make a movie. But I'm really glad that he allowed me to do it, because I think where we ended up is somewhere really powerful, where the people that have never heard his story will now get to hear it, and they'll hear it in its true form. They won't hear the lies, and they won't hear the propaganda and the things that aren't true. They're going to hear it straight, and of course they'll hear a portion of it, but a man's life for 30 years is much bigger than an hour and a half movie.
Right. Well, I mean, my motivation was simply getting out an accurate account of what's going on, because there is so much nonsense that's been repeated on the internet and distorted, and so really I was just looking for a vehicle to get the true story out.
Yeah.
Right. And I think for 30 years now, that has been what people have been waiting for. Now, if I could ask you, Jeremy, could you tell us a little about what it was that got you interested to speak with Bob about his experiences and get this sort of thing, get the ball rolling, so to say?
Yeah, I mean, real simple. I think like most of your listeners, if they were born in 1989 already, I was 13 years old, and I heard Bob on the radio and George Knapp interviewing him, and it really, I like to say, it weaponized my curiosity, in that when I heard what he said about the gravity propulsion system, it kind of flipped the script for me, because I was aware of rockets and that kind of thing, but the idea of falling into place in space and time, I mean, it was just really cool. And the technology of it and the propulsion system, that got me curious, and from that day forward, I was listening.
Exactly. And as you said earlier, there's been a ton of disinformation. I mean, a lot of the videos that I've made surrounding Bob have just been the same old info that's out there. I mean, there hasn't been really anything new in all of these years, and so I really don't know if a lot of the stuff that I referenced regarding his experiences was true, half true, and so I wanted to ask some questions here that I know my audience would love to hear to you, Bob. Now, you have said that you worked at S4 on, did you say there were at least 9 craft that you knew of, alien craft, at this secretive site?
Yeah, there were absolutely 9. Yeah.
Okay. Now, apart from the sleeker sports model craft that you had mentioned in the past, can you give us an idea, perhaps, of what the condition of the other craft were in? Were they totaled? Were they shot down in a perfect condition, as if they'd been gifted to the military? What type of condition were they in, if you could say?
The condition of all the craft, with the exception of one, which it looked like they had intentionally fired a projectile at, just to see if the projectile would penetrate it. But with the exception of that craft, everything looked like it was new. Now, I've heard stories and, read on the internet about, theories about them being gifted or crash landing. Clearly, none of them crashed at all. Now, my gut feeling, and this is my gut feeling, I have no information on this, that I almost believe that this was some sort of archaeological find in some way.
Really?
So I don't think there was an exchange like we're going to give you a bunch of craft or and again, I really can't say why. It's just because of the mutterings of my supervisor and the other people that worked there.
And it was very compartmentalized, as I understand it. I mean, it was basically, here's what you need to know, and you don't need to know anything else. Is that basically how it was?
Yeah, we worked on the buddy system, and when I worked on nuclear weapons at Los Alamos, it's similar. You don't get to know the entire project, how everything works. You're assigned a component of it, and
Right.
you work on that component. And you, unlike Los Alamos and other places, there is no free open discussion. And open discussion is really what propels science forward. That's the one problem I really had down at S4. They worked on the buddy system. My lab buddy, quote unquote, was Barry, and you're only given really one person to bounce ideas off of, and you can talk to him. In fact, when you go have lunch at the facility, you can only sit with him and you can only talk with him. You can't talk with other people or exchange ideas, and that in itself can thwart the entire project moving forward. But
Right.
it's very compartmentalized. So it was really just Barry and I working on that one small subcomponent at that time.
Right, and I think I'm really glad you said that, because that's a message I've been trying to communicate to especially the younger viewers out there who, in this sort of high-paced internet age, they want everything now. They want all of the answers right now. And so they come to me and they hear that I may be speaking with you and Jeremy, and they say, well, look, if you're talking to the most well-known name in ufology, if you're talking to Bob, well, he should know all the answers. You should be able to get every answer about aliens, where they come from. You should be able to just lay it out for me in a nice summary. And I try to let them know this is not how things work. Bob was he's one of many. Everything was very compartmentalized. And so you do have answers, but you don't have the full scope, because you were just a link in the chain, as it happens, working there. But your story is fascinating in and of itself, and I'd like to pivot to Jeremy here and ask you sort of a double question, Jeremy, if I could. First of all, with this film and with others, is it true that you do everything yourself as far as filming, interviewing, recording, audio editing? Are you truly an independent filmmaker, and at the same time being an independent and doing a film like this, very controversial film? Have you ran into anything during the making of this, any sort of pushback, things happening, or from people or places that didn't want this film to come out?
Tyler, well, first of all, look, man, yeah, I'm a completely independent filmmaker. People don't understand what that means. I also film in the auteur fashion, which basically means I do everything. I edit, I film, I finance it. So yeah, I'm totally independent. My life, doing this is dependent upon people liking it. So if you watch my films, it directly affects me. So yes, I'm an completely independent filmmaker. The second part of your question is, have I been resisted in any way in doing this film? I was going to just say no. I'm just like laughing now. So the answer to that is I had never been in any way resisted, only assisted. People have only helped me in the process of making films. They encourage me. They give me tips. So actually, personally, I have never, ever experienced anything that would try to stop me from making a film. I'll just leave it at that.
Right. Well, certainly we do know that Bob, again, from what we know that is public or that he has said himself, he has had a great amount of pushback over the years from coming out and what he's done. And, I think one of the biggest questions on my viewers' minds, as well as mine, to Bob here is, if I may ask bluntly, if you did what you did, and it looks like you got someone scared. I mean, I believe that you are telling the truth 100%. So let's just say if you did it, how are you still alive?
Well, clearly, that was the whole point of coming out and saying what I did. Look, you just can't kill people as soon as they say something. All it does is underline what they said and immediately get everybody looking in that direction. The fact that I said what I did and told them my experiences down at S4, that was done to protect myself. I had already been shot at before that. And, so it works in the opposite of what most people think.
Right. To take us down would only be to further validate our claims, basically.
Exactly.
I'll tell you a little thing real quick. Just, people don't know the humanity of this, the actual experience. So, no matter what you think or what you can make up in your mind, Bob came forward to protect himself. That's what happened.
Right.
And he didn't come forward, openly like, oh yeah, let's do this, man. I mean, George Knapp and Bob Lazar physically wrestled on the ground the day that the tape was being put in to reveal his identity. George told me the story. I recorded it, and Bob told me the story. So you have to understand, look at it that way. I mean, it's hilarious. I mean, obviously George won, he's
right.
He wipes my weight.
Yeah. So he beat him. It's like, that was the deal, man. Whether you understand it or believe it or not, I've come to truly understand that Bob came forward to protect himself.
Well, it's kind of more complicated than that. This doesn't, I know everybody's used to watching Hollywood films and things of that sort, and it's not how real life goes. You don't shoot, bullets into a gas tank and they explode into giant fireballs. That stuff doesn't happen,
right.
And it doesn't work like that either. The only time they would go out of their way to kill someone is if they're consistently releasing increasingly damaging information. The thing is, I released all the damaging information initially, and I was done. There was nothing else to say. There was no reason to stop me any further.
Right.
What they do at that point, they did do. They began to destroy your friends and family. People I know had, we audited by the IRS, people that had security clearances and other jobs of that sort had their clearances pulled. So they begin to destroy the world around you. So you lose your support group. It's a lot more complicated than people think or Hollywood portrays.
Was it true that you were shot at one point in time?
Yes. I was shot at on Charleston Boulevard getting on to the freeway in Las Vegas. Yeah.
In your opinion, do you think that was part of the sort of campaign to just discredit you? They know they can't kill you, but they know that they can spend years trying to discredit you, hurting you and your family. Now, those pop shots that they took at you, do you think that was a part of that? Maybe just to scare you? Was it just a lone wolf? Do you think it had anything to do with it? Or was it just one of those freak things where you were like, well, what the hell was that? But you got away and that was it. You never found out what that was from.
I don't know. I think it was just essentially terrorism. I think we mentioned in the movie, there were times my friend and I would go out to work at a health club there, and all the car doors and trunk and hood would be open. I mean, there were constant things that let me know that they could gain access or do whatever they wanted to.
Right.
And
they were on you.
Quite frankly, it really was wearing me down at the time. I really wasn't sure what I was going to do.
George tells a lot of this story. He says, he always told me for all these years, George has been a mentor to me in journalism. He's broke the story with Bob in 1989. He has said to me over and over when I first started talking to him, he goes, you're never going to get it because you weren't there. I was there, he says. He goes, I saw it. This is real. This happened. Someone didn't want Bob talking. They wanted to mess with him, and they did mess with him. So I guess the point is, looking at it now 30 years later from our outside views, it's different than the people that lived it. And I've talked to a lot of them now, a lot of them that lived it. Some of them went on camera with me for the movie. So I just want to kind of put an exclamation point on what Bob said.
Right.
This is real.
It is real. I mean, from the thousands of videos that I've done, and again, I just sort of take what comes to me. I try to correlate. I post it to YouTube, and I do stories on people like you and Bob. And from what I'm found, it's extremely real. They're definitely covering it up. It's an ongoing cover-up. And my question for Bob would be, what is your opinion, Bob, on the state of, I guess you'd call it, the UFO movement, where we have guys like me on YouTube, but we have many others putting out movies and books. A lot of them, in my opinion, charlatans. That's why I don't do interviews with them, but they do have huge followings, a lot of disinformation. So, was it that kind of caused you to come back into the spotlight? And if not, what was it that made you say, okay, it's been long enough, I'm going to come back out and tell the truth of exactly what happened and do this film? What was your major, your stepstone to doing that?
Well, if you're talking about the stepstone to doing the movie with Jeremy, that certainly played a part. There was so much nonsense getting passed around, and it began to grow and fester as time went on because I never challenged any of it, and people began to build on it, and it got to ridiculous proportions. And that was really shocking. And as you mentioned, anytime I looked on the internet or read any UFO material, it was so blatantly nonsense. And whether it's Facebook or Twitter, or I'm not really into any social media, but there you can find people that were, pretending to be me. Mm-hmm. on everything. I even was listening one time on an AM radio driving, I think it was to New Mexico from Las Vegas, and it was late night. I turned the radio on just to keep myself awake, and it was a UFO program, so I turned it on talk radio, and here's a guy that was talking about, I had lunch with Bob Lazar yesterday, and look, he told me all this new it was all nonsense. So, all of this was just constantly going on, and I heard so much nonsense. From people having interviews with reptilians on YouTube, and it's crazy. So the sad thing is that, there's probably 2 or 3% true and accurate information out there, but how, especially today, the way information is disseminated around on the internet, how are you going to dig through 98% nonsense and mine out the 2%? It's almost impossible.
It is almost impossible. In a small way, that's what I attempt to do with Secure Team. I have multiple people working for me. They bring me, research summaries every day. I try to sift through it. It's hard to do anything from a computer screen. Some things you just need to get out there and do. But as you said, it's probably 3% of it is real. And, it reminds me of a time where, again, someone had come on to my channel, posted a comment. They had your face as their little, screen name face there, and said, hey guys, Bob Lazar here, ask me anything you want, right in the comments of one of my videos. And I said, there's no way. But it was amazing to see how many people were brought in by that, totally fooled by it. I think I ended up deleting the comment after I finally figured it out. I highly doubt Bob would just pop up in the comment section after all these years. And, so you're right.
Only, for a brief period, Bob was trying to answer questions on Twitter, and that just was overwhelming, and that was done with. However, I'm going to take personal credit both for our buddy Zach's engagement, and also for the fact that United Nuclear, which is Bob's business, is now officially on Instagram, and his lead employee, Zach, is the one that uploads the images. And he just started it a few days ago. I don't know if Bob even knows that. I think he does. But Zach's doing the official United Nuclear Instagram. So there is now finally an official social media where people can.
But it's not from me.
No, it's your business. It's your business.
That's awesome. Congratulations. That's awesome. It's awesome news. And, I think it's awesome. And you're going to see this in the film. I don't want to give too much away. But this is the first time in many years that we get a a bird's eye view into the life of Mr. Lazar, what he went through, very tough times, how the controversy shaped him throughout the years. And to my viewers who are listening, you're going to see that in this film. You're going to see a lot of stuff. And again, I don't want to talk about it. Jeremy, without saying too much, is there maybe something that happened in this film of note that maybe you'd like to kind of talk about, something explosive, or that sort of what blew your mind about making this film? Or what has Bob told you, rather?
Well, I mean, yeah, look, the whole process for me was kind of mind-blowing. You know, George challenged me in 2012. Oh, yeah, sure, get Bob to talk to you. You have to be the luckiest leprechaun in the world. I mean, it was like, it was hilarious. So the whole process, I think, has been, for me, really interesting. You know, Bob saying, okay, total open book. What do you want to know? Let's do it. You know, here are the tapes. Here's the photographs. I'm not going to pre-sort them. Just grab the box of tapes and digitize them. Whatever's on there, it's yours. So Bob has been completely 100% open with me without giving me any restriction, put me in touch with his mom, his friend, whatever. So that's been really eye-opening, to be honest with you.
Right.
So I don't know, man. I think I'll give you one thing from the movie. I'll give you a spoiler right now.
Okay.
So close your ears.
The fans want it.
Okay, the fans want it. Okay, so I'll give you a hardcore one, man. So 30 years ago, Bob Lazar said that there was a gentleman named Mike Thigpen, a very specific name, that this guy was, he thought, an agency that was doing a background check on him. He didn't know, maybe FBI. George goes on the news. He says, oh, we've got some news. There's a guy named Mike Thigpen, and he came and like questioned Bob Lazar. You know, we could check the veracity of his claims, and, you know, went on the news. And I can just imagine, I could just imagine this guy, he's eating like pasta at his house, and he's at dinner with his wife. He sees the news and like just, it's a fork drop moment. He just draws his fork into his food. Well, I know that, you know, that was his reaction, because after 30 years, I found him. I found Mike Thigpen. And that could only be done after 30 years, because George tried in 1989, called, and the FBI, he had a source that told him it wasn't the FBI, George. It was the OFI, Office of Federal Investigation. They were doing Bob's security clearance. So George tried to get a hold of this guy, who was, by the way, in trouble because they wondered if he was impersonating an FBI agent, because how did that get confused? So this poor guy, you know, he's just doing his job, and he got hit with a storm because of this. Well, for 30 years, no one was able to find him. I found him, tracked him down, and I talked to him. And he is a cool cat. He's a good guy. And he says, yes, I was doing security clearances in 1989 for Nellis and the base. And I do. He says, I'll go as far as I do remember Bob Lazar.
Well, Jeremy, let me follow that up and ask, you know, has your personal opinion about the world in general, the world we live in, has it changed at all since you've gotten to know Bob Lazar? Has it enlightened you about certain things, or maybe changed your mind regarding certain things or topics?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think what my hope for the movie is that you get to kind of know Bob a little bit, because I think that's the missing component. A lot of people can dehumanize Bob and his story and just, you know, say whatever they want about him because they don't know him. And so it's easy to make stuff up that wouldn't be congruent with his character because there's nothing to defend it. So I hope in my movie you kind of get a feel, as a documentary filmmaker, I hope you get a feel for who Bob is, because I believe a big part of the story is the human story. It's about who Bob is. Is he somebody that would be trying to like waste his time messing with you for 30 years, or is he somebody who wouldn't? And I think that's that's the big question. Everybody in the earth wants to know, is Bob worthy of our trust? When you boil it down, that's what it is. They want to know, is Bob worthy of our trust? Of course everybody wants to believe this. What a cool story. We all want to believe it. But that's the only way that they're going to get, you know, to the bottom line, is if they kind of look at the facts, determine for themselves.
Do the facts back it up. That's what they truly want to know.
Don't use junk data. That's
right.
Bob's. Don't use junk data. Don't use the stories that aren't true. So yes, my whole life has been changed because, you know, I wanted to know if this story was true. I wanted to know if the truth about UFOs. Hey, that's a bonus. Really, I got to know a guy named Bob Lazar. He's a cool fucking guy. So, oh, I can't say that on your YouTube. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, it's fine. It's
Tweet
totally
that out.
fine.
He's a cool dude. Yeah. So there you go.
This is historic. Say whatever you want. Do whatever you want. Get naked if you like. So
Bleep me
now,
out. Bleep me out, man. All right.
so Bob, I want to get back if I could. I know you've probably talked about this a million times, but of course, I know the viewers would love to know a little bit more about some of these craft that you worked on at S4. So just a few basic questions, whether you know all the answers or not, at least we can say this is what Bob knows exactly. So I guess I'd like to start off with, now we covered the sports model, the conditions they were in. Now, were you ever told at any time what star system or area of space that the craft came from? Did they come home from all the same place, if you know what I mean? When were they acquired? Do you have any of that information about these craft?
I don't have any information as far as when, and it wasn't, I like to get very particular on exactly what was told or read or I saw. So I was not told that, but I did read in the briefings that the craft came from the Zeta Reticuli star system. So that's the location. It's a binary star system. Apparently there are several planets around it, and it's only visible from the southern hemisphere,
right.
So don't bother going out there and trying to find it at night.
Right.
Right. But again, that's something that I read, and that's all that I know about that.
Yeah. Well, oddly enough, that specific star system is well known in the ufology movement. For whether it's true or false, there have been a lot of stories, a lot of reports, a lot of testimony, just a lot of stories that seem to all go back one way or another to that star system. So there definitely may something might be there. So that's very, very interesting. Now, if we could, speaking a little bit more about the equipment in some of these craft, can you explain the equipment that was on board the sport model craft, as far as communications, weaponry, or camouflage? What did you see when walking into this craft?
Those are all separate questions. So, again, to be specific, as far as how, a very brief overview of how the craft worked, there is a reactor in the center of the craft. In this craft, there are only 3 seats. At the bottom of the craft, there are several levels in there. At the bottom, the sub-level of the craft, there are 3 gravity emitters. They look like, for lack of a better analogy, like a couple 55-gallon drums stuck on top of one another, just big tubes. There were 3 of them. And they're on a very interesting, connected to the floor above on a very interesting pipe, I guess you would call it, that bends at 360 degrees. So these are just 3 big drums essentially suspended. Directly above them are the gravity amplifiers. They sit right above them, and the reactor's in the middle. The reactor produces the energy and produces the base gravity wave. It's amplified by the amplifiers, and it's channeled down into the gravity emitters, and the gravity emitters can be swung in any direction to produce a distortion in gravity. There is no wiring, there is no interconnection between any components. The components work just by being close to one another. And considering the power output, which is the equivalent of a few nuclear power plants, that's really amazing, because according to the laws of thermodynamics, there always has to be a loss. Right. There's no 100% transfer of energy, but it apparently was occurring here because there was no excess heat produced anywhere. And I can run off on a technical tangent here, but I won't. You also asked what I saw inside, I think.
Yeah, communication systems, or maybe what was the type of metal used, if it was metal at all, things of that nature.
Again, this is compartmentalized. So
Okay.
There was a metallurgy group that dealt with that. All I can say is I felt and ran my hand against the material. The entire craft is the same color, and it's all the same material, and there are no sharp corners anywhere. There is a radius on everything. And it felt to me, when I put my hand on it, it felt cold. In my mind, that relates to metal, but could it be an advanced ceramic of some kind? Absolutely. So I can't even comment on what the craft is made of. It was kind of a pewter gray in color.
Right.
And there was an upper level on the craft that I did not have access to or information on. It's where, if you've seen pictures of the craft that I worked on, there are black rectangular, what people call portholes around the top. They're not windows. I personally believe there's some sort of planar sensor that just determines where the craft is in space and how to orient itself.
Right.
So,
well, I think that having said all that, I think what would probably be an even more important question to my viewers, which is that, do these things have bathrooms?
let me there's actually a really cool answer for that.
That's a popular question.
It is. It is. But let me ask Bob something real quick, because I actually don't know the answer and I want to know. It's like, was there an obvious navigation? Like, how do you think they flew the craft? Was there like some kind of navigational?
I really don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea how they got from. I mean, I see
like
how
the hand thing, or
I have no idea.
Yeah.
And I don't even like to speculate, because then people will say, "Well, Bob said,"
right,
so that's not. So I don't even want to go.
Okay,
there.
So do they have bathrooms? Did you see?
No, there's no bathrooms, and quite frankly, there's no need for them, because the travel time is so short. You're taking gigantic. Remember, time. Space-time is one thing, and if you're distorting space-time, you're taking gigantic leaps in milliseconds that,
right.
You're not traveling. You don't really break the speed of light because you're traveling in a linear fashion, but you go far in excess of the speed of light because you're bending space and time.
Right.
You're just taking gigantic leaps. So you're never assuming they need bathrooms.
Yeah, right.
Well, especially
you're not in flight for a long enough time, to have any kind of emergency.
Right. And another thought I had, which has been widely discussed, is that many of these alien beings, or at least particularly the smaller gray alien, a lot of people seem to believe that these are droids of some sort. They are not flesh and blood, and they are more like probes that are sent out. They fly these things, so there is no need for eating or drinking or using the bathroom or anything like that. Have you heard anything similar, or have you at least heard of this theory? And that's to you or Jeremy.
I haven't heard of that theory, but I do have to say, I did see a briefing. Now, there are several other projects going on at the same time, and what we do have is each group gets a 2 or 3 page briefing of what the other groups are doing. And they're trying to keep everything compartmentalized, but what they want to do is at least let you have a little knowledge of what's going on in the other groups in case there's a connection. So you can complete your research.
Right.
But so in my briefing, it did have to do with as far as the actual beings that were in the craft. They had a photograph of them where their a chest was cut and peeled back, and they had made notes of.
Wow.
It was only one central organ. It's as if all the organs had grown together into one mass, and it had multiple functions. And that was like the extent of my knowledge of it.
Right.
But
right.
It was certainly a biological specimen. Now, whether or not that piloted the craft or that was making reference to something, that had to do with the craft, I don't know. But there was definitely a reference to a biological entity of some kind that had unique organs inside.
Well, and another thing regarding these craft, this may be the most controversial of this whole Bob Lazar topic, is that of element 115, which is said to have been used to power these craft. And of course, nobody knew back in the 80s. Element 115 did not exist. It wasn't until almost 20 years later that, yes, we have something here. Now, there are debunkers, so-called debunkers out there who say, well, Bob didn't know what he was talking about in regards to element 115. It's not stable. So what would you say to them regarding element 115, how it exactly worked, and maybe how these debunkers today simply just don't understand these things about this element. You know, they're not in the know as much as you were. What can you tell us about that element and why it was perfectly legit and it was used to power these craft?
Yeah, well, that's an understatement. First of all, don't tell me I don't know about 115 because it was in my hand. Second of all, 115 was synthesized recently. And, you know, for people saying, well, it's not stable and, you know, that's the end of it, clearly you don't understand chemistry, the way elements work.
Right.
All elements have isotopes to them. And the example I always give is, you know, for example, hydrogen. We all know hydrogen's a gas, hydrogen 1. Actually, the technical name is protium to it. It has 1 proton and 1 neutron. Well, there's actually 2 other forms of hydrogen. One is deuterium and one is tritium. Tritium's radioactive. Well, there's, you know, other elements, cesium, that can have 20 or 30, I don't remember what it is, isotopes to it. All elements can have the same number of protons, making the element, but they can have different numbers of neutrons, and by changing the different number of neutrons, the element can have remarkably different properties. So yeah, element 115 probably has many, many isotopes of it that decay, but there is certainly one isotope that is absolutely stable, and it is that isotope that is used in the craft.
Right. So it's basically sort of an issue where, you know, just because we can't figure it out yet today does not mean that these alien beings didn't have it figured out, because they did, obviously.
Well, no question in time if they keep experimenting with... Now, keep in mind, they only made 4 atoms of 115. And again, if they keep experimenting with it, I'm sure they'll find eventually a combination with neutrons that will be stable, and that'll be another point of indication. But yeah, that's typical of any element. There's nothing new about that, and anybody claiming, you know, that disproves it really has limited knowledge about that.
Yeah, I'm going to jump in here and just say I've done a lot of research for the film on this because I wanted to understand it. You know, I'm not a scientist, I'm a filmmaker, but I did talk with some of the top scientists in the nation and outside of our nation, from Russia to San Francisco to Washington, D.C. So I talked to a number of scientists and physicists and people that actually work hands-on with the fabrication of super heavy elements. And across the board, you know, some people got ticklish talking to me when they realized that it had anything to do with UFOs. However, the people that would talk to me about the hardcore science, they absolutely 100% unanimously across the board confirmed and agreed that element 115, that we cannot discount a stabilized version exactly like Bob Lazar described. So I just want to make that really, really clear to your audience, Tyler, because people always use this as a fake news. They use this as something to say, to dismiss and discount what Bob said. And that is, they say that it is junk science or it is pseudo science, what he said. I have confirmed every way from Sunday that we cannot discount a stabilized form of element 115. And so I want to say that on the record now. It is total BS when people try to act like scientists and say that they discount it. They either don't understand the story or they've got an agenda, because the top of the world's deal with this told me to my face. So I just want to throw that down.
Well, you heard it right there, guys. That's all the info you need to know about 115, exactly what Bob and Jeremy just said. I mean, we have scientists on record who say what Jeremy just said. I mean, we know the element exists, and I personally believe that he was there. And, you know, as we were talking about these so-called debunkers who will pick and choose these little things, you know, a lot of people attack Bob by saying, well, there's no proof that he worked at Los Alamos, or there's no proof he went to this this college or was at this base or anything like that. Well, we've come to find out that he is, and there has been proof, not just finding his name in the phone book registry, but as many of you will see in the film, and I don't want to give anything away, but there is much more to this story that proves that Bob was there. He did this work, so you can count on that, seeing it in this film. Now, you mentioned earlier, Jeremy, Mr. George Knapp. Now, he is your mentor, is that correct?
Yeah, George Knapp has been a mentor to me. He's been an incredible resource of information. He originally broke the story about Bob back in 1989, and he actually championed for 25 plus years completely alone, about this story. And I really admire him for that. He stuck to his guns. And look, George Knapp was convinced of Bob's truth. And if for a second he thought Bob wasn't telling the truth, he would have not only dropped the story, he would have exposed Bob. And people forget, look, man, Bob tried to prove his story to you. George wanted to know too. So George put him through 4 polygraph tests. Bob aced them all.
Aced them.
No deception. Yeah, aced them. No which way from Sunday about that. So that was with Terry Tabernetti. Period. Full stop. Aced them all. So what else can he do? Look, George put him in front of people that verified, worked at Area 51 at the time, because that's where Bob would land in the plane and then go on the bus, and aced it. They all believed he was there. At least they could prove Area 51. So George really put Bob through his paces. It's not just like he wanted as a journalist to believe a cool story. So there's a lot of history here. People need to just understand.
Right. And
so George is the bomb, is what I'm saying. He's the bomb.
He is.
And he did the work, and he stood up, and he stands for it, and he beat his chest like King Kong, and he's the bomb. That's it.
He is. That definitely well said, sir. Now he also took people out, and he said, look, I know for a fact that they are going to be testing these craft at a certain time of night in a certain area, and isn't it true that multiple times, Bob, you took people out, and like clockwork, these craft were out there being tested, and you even got it on film. Is that correct?
Yeah, I did have, when I was there, the one thing that I was able to memorize were the name. First of all, there were only 22 other people that had clearance to work on the project, and I knew those names. And there was also a clear test schedule, and they always, the test site is close, not close, but I mean the closest highway to it is, I don't remember the distance to that. Do you,
no,
Jeremy?
I don't.
It's not, but what they did is they looked for statistically the lowest volume of traffic along the highway before they did the tests. And that was always on a Wednesday night. All the flight tests were on a Wednesday night. And I had the times of those tests down. Now, when things went bad between us and my employers there, I still had the schedule. So that's when I told my friends, hey, we need to go out. What I told you, I want to show you guys what I was working on. So we'd go out there, hide out in the desert, and the craft came up and flew around, at the times that I specified.
Right, it's amazing footage. And, I know it's been years, but from what you saw them testing in those videos, in your experience and in your opinion, from maybe some of the research you've done today, I'm not sure if you've had ever your own UFO encounter, but in your opinion, would most of the UFOs seen today come from a human source, from an off-world source? This is almost split right down the middle, where half of my audience believe that it's all us. Every craft, even the ones that show, anti-gravity tech, everything is ours. The other half believe it's all off-world, and that maybe we have one or two of their craft. I mean, in your opinion, where do you think you would fall?
Well, it's certainly advanced technology. Now, I mean, can I say that it's not advanced? I mean, this is really pushing the limits of, belief here. But can I say it's not advanced technology from the future? I mean, that's possible. It is. How do you explain the connection to Zeta Reticuli, though? I mean, is it possible in the future humans live there and we're coming back and just checking on ourselves? I mean, all of these are...
That is another big theory, that it is humans.
I mean,
it is us.
It's possible. No, I have nothing to say that that's possible or not possible. It's all... It can all possibly be real.
Right.
But I really don't know, actually.
Well, I mean, if it's funny you ask, like, has Bob ever had
Well,
a
I was
UFO?
going to come to you next. Have you seen one,
No,
Jeremy?
But I was joking because, of course, like you did because you had S4, but not a classic UFO.
No,
experience.
a classic actually, when I went to work out there, the first thing I thought was, first of all, I never believed in UFOs. I thought people that believed in UFOs were just nutcakes. And, when I went out there, the first time I saw the craft, I thought, oh, well, this clearly explains all the UFO sightings. We're developing a really advanced fighter, and they've been testing it, and everybody thinks it's alien life forms. This is hilarious. I'm so, happy to be working on this project. And it was clear that was not the case.
Right. Yeah, what I meant to say was, since then, have you seen anything in the skies, or do you think there's any of our public technology, fighter jets that we have today, that could be potentially using tech from those craft so many years ago, just in your opinion?
I haven't seen anything at all. I mean, the technology is extremely advanced, and I haven't seen anything. It's all been just...
And you were not able to successfully back engineer it, were you? I just want to clarify that. When you were working on these craft, wasn't there an issue where, I mean, you can take them apart, you can analyze them, but you couldn't replicate it? Was that true?
Right. It wasn't just back engineering. I mean, the aim of the project was to duplicate the technology with the materials available to us. Now, we could, at least from what we ascertained, is determine how the systems worked. But there was the problem is we couldn't duplicate anything. We couldn't even duplicate the metal in the conduits. Everything was, and pardon the pun, was alien to us. And it was just too big of a project. And so, they would have splinter groups working on smaller components of it, like, you guys figure out how this part works, but it's really a dead end. The material science was just too advanced for us. So, no, we couldn't duplicate anything. Now, maybe there were some, there were some components here, or the way things were laid out that might have translated themselves into military components. But to me, it was just a giant military project. But the major technology never made it into anywhere because it was all very high energy related, and we had no way to store and transmit levels of that energy at all.
Do you think they're still likely working on it, sort of tinkering with it to this day, trying to make something out of it in some dark hangar somewhere?
It would probably be conjecture. I mean, I remember when I first talked to Dennis, that was my supervisor, they had an argument about this being out in the South Pacific to keep it out of, and remember, that's where they did the first, thermonuclear bomb test. To put it out there just to keep it away from prying eyes and things of that sort. But the reason was the same as it was for the, hydrogen bomb development in the 50s, was it's just too expensive to shuttle back and forth all the time. But that was always in the back of their minds. They always wanted to leave the continental United States and take the stuff somewhere else. Maybe after I came out and kind of, ruined the situation there, they did that, or I would find it very hard to believe that's in the same place and still proceeding at the same rate. But there's no doubt research continues on it.
Well, and I think, and Jeremy, would you agree to this, that despite the fact that we don't know where they're coming from, would you agree that we are definitely surveilling them? I mean, with the recent DoD releases of those 3 UFO clips taken from fighter jets, everything I've been able to scrounge up and put on the channel, I mean, they definitely seem to be monitoring these things. They know that these things are here. We know that they're here. I mean, it doesn't take long. I mean, how many pieces of footage and eyewitness testimonials do you have to go through before you start believing?
Right. I mean, look, it's not a matter of belief. UFOs are either real or they're not real. Obviously, they're real. If you don't understand that, then you have a data poor perspective. But the, kind of a social kind of consciousness, people are starting to understand that now because of the release from the New York Times in December of 2017, However, I'd like to say I did break the Tic Tac UFO case, the famous
That's
Tic
right,
Tac
you
UFO
did.
case, before the New York Times, because Commander David Fravor, who's a friend of mine, was talking to me for 2 years before that, and I kept it quiet. I didn't tell anybody, and I developed sources. I broke that story
That's right.
twice before the New York Times. Now, what does that tell you? Yeah, I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt. The United States government does have a UFO program, and they admitted it to you. And it was called ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. And guess what? It was a reactionary program to military encounters and sightings, and that is one tiny program. And I happen to personally know that there are more.
Why do
And
you
you're
think
gonna-
they let you release that in the first place? Why do you think
No-
they even let you in the door?
Nobody let me release anything. I've got a charming personality, Tyler.
That you do, sir.
Yeah, I called up these individual witnesses, these admirals, these fighter pilots, and I made friends with them, and I didn't burn them, and I didn't distort their story or mess it up when I told it.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? The whole world is now. Commander Fravor's story is being twisted, and I told it right, and we talked the other day, and he's like, everybody else is twisting it. I'm like, I told you it would happen. And I was like, yeah, I'll try to clear it up, but that's the deal, man. I just don't burn people. It ain't worth it. And the people I talk with is because I want to, and they're good people. I have a no D-bag policy, so.
Right. Well, from this new film, which I actually had a chance to watch last night, I wanted it to be fresh, and I just I wanted to wait as long as I could and stick with the audience because they're having to wait for it. But it was an amazing film, and it truly gives us an insight after all of these years to what Bob's life, what he went through, how his life has changed. And, I'd like to ask you, Jeremy, well, you've said before that timing is everything with your films. Why have you chosen as a filmmaker to focus your attention on this story now? And is there any new info that the global audience will be learning upon the release of this new film?
Yeah, there's new info. The whole film, this is not a rehashing of the past. This is not repurposing vintage footage.
Thank you for saying that.
This is brand new, breaking news and information. In fact, I am shocked because I did not anticipate what we were going to experience in the filming of this movie. So, yeah, you can anticipate to have your socks knocked off for the film. Absolutely. You'll hear the chatter as soon as it's out in public. People are going to talk about it. So why now, though, is kind of an interesting question. I just want to briefly answer that. I mean, first of all, it's because, I don't know, Bob let me finally film him. So that was cool. And then second of all, because I have always thought this is the most valuable story in modern history about UFOs and exotic propulsion. And I stand by that.
I agree.
And because we live in a different world now than we did in 1989, we now live in a world where people are on Twitter and social media and all sorts of, every communication device possible, yet they have a lack of credible information. This is credible information, and the world has changed. We now know that it was a lie, that the study of UFOs ended in 1969 with Project Blue Book, that our government lied to us, and that in fact, we are currently studying the UFO problem on multiple levels, and that is a game changer. All of a sudden, the story that Bob Lazar told in 1989 about a government program to study UFOs, to back engineer them, has a completely different meaning and light because of modern day events. It is time. It is time, and as I like to say, Bob's critics have been holding the mic for 30 years. And we're taking the mic back, and we're taking it back on December 3rd at the world premiere in Los Angeles, which you're going to be at, Tyler. So we're taking the mic back, and we're not giving up that mic for a while. We're going to scream into it.
Yeah, that's going to be a blast. Well, I know you guys don't have a lot of time. I just have a few more questions, starting with Bob. But let me ask you this. What was if you could say, the most important thing that you learned from your time at S4? And follow up, if you could, would you go back and accept, or would you not accept your position at Area 51 and S4 if you could do it over?
Boy, as far as the most important thing, that's a difficult thing to say. I guess the one thing that really caught my attention was the fact that there were alien craft. I mean, that's it. I thought this was advanced, what they hired me for was advanced technology and advanced propulsion system that the military had made, and it just happened to look like what people had called a flying saucer. The biggest shock in my life was the fact that the actual aim of the project was, we have to figure out how this thing works.
Right.
So it was really the scope of the whole project that there were actually alien craft from another civilization. So that today remains, and probably always will be in my life, the most shocking thing I was ever presented with. I already forgot the second part of that
Would you go back
question.
and accept the job at S4 if you could do it over?
Yeah, I would always accept that job, because just being exposed to that technology, things I thought were impossible, I will never forget. And usually people ask after that, would you, if you could go back, tell the public again? And I really don't know how to honestly answer that question, because sometimes I say I wouldn't, sometimes I say I would. It just depends on my mood of that day.
Right.
And I really don't know, but I know I would never turn down that project, especially knowing, that technology is real, because that was the most fascinating thing in my life.
Right, and I think that'll lead me to my final question for you, Bob, and it's a big question that my audience constantly asks, which is that in the end, why do you think, Bob, that there is so much secrecy? Why has the public at large been lied to? Why is this secret being kept about the UFO subject, and still is to this day?
Because this is the most powerful technology on the planet, and anybody that controls this technology controls the world. Look, it's all a battle, whether we know it or not, between, Russia, the United States, North Korea. I mean, it's, if you really take a step back, they're all acting like little children on a playground. But really, this is extremely powerful technology, and this is a military project. And you don't want to give away even the slightest hint of what's going on. At one time, the project, right before I got involved with it, the Russians were involved, and they made a huge discovery at some point. Again, this was right before I came on, and they kicked everyone else out and kept it to themselves. And there's kind of been, a point of contention between the Russians and the United States at that time. Well, I don't know what that was, but yeah, this is it. I think it all boils down to weapons and controlling the world and forcing your views on everybody else. That's just the bottom line.
Well, do you think that, is there something that needs to happen for our government to finally tell us the truth, or is it just out of our hands?
I don't know if I can answer that question. I don't think our government ever really comes clean unless they're pressured to for some reason.
Right.
And there's no reason for them to come clean about this. Quite frankly, I'm more concerned about the repercussions from the movie coming back on me. But I have. It wouldn't surprise me if I suddenly got accused of some bizarre thing, and I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah, that's been, I got to tell you, that's a debate of mine. In one sense, I'm like, yes, the movie's going to do really well now. And the other sense, I'm thinking, oh no, is that going to affect Bob? And I think you'll understand that when you watch the movie, that there's real world consequences to this type of dialogue. And I experienced that for the first time in my life, doing this film. So as a friend, I want to, hope and protect that nothing bad's going to happen to Bob from this. But, Bob has always been able to defend himself. He has never needed a defender. He just chooses not to engage, and I think smartly over the years, because there's so much signal or so much noise in the signal. So I'm going to look at this really positively. I'm going to say we've had 30 years where Bob has been, really beaten up by the UFO community unnecessarily, and honestly, we're so far beyond it. Our scope of our audience is so much bigger now with this movie. Dozens of millions of people are going to see this, if not more, and it's a new day. I don't think Bob needs to worry about repercussions from government or anything like that. We are now out in the light permanently.
Let me tell you something. we have an army behind us now. I mean, my little channel alone, we're about to hit 2 million subscribers, but have had almost 1 billion views in the last couple of years. We have an army. We missed you, Bob. We truly did. I'm tired of posting videos using 20-year-old vintage footage of you. I'm so happy that you came on. You have nothing to worry about. There's an army out there who support you and back you. And gentlemen, it's been an honor, a true honor, to have both of you here. I want to thank you for coming on today. Bob, you truly are a legend. You have millions of people behind you, so just remember that. I know it's been tough for you over these years, but sometimes great men have to pay a price for the things they do and for doing what's truly right, and that is giving the public the truth that they deserve. And you have gone above and beyond that, sir. So I want to thank you for that. To Jeremy, I want to say thank you, my friend, for coming back on Secure Team once again, and for all of your hard work in getting these films made and getting this film made, and for being one of the very few left spearheading this movement and leading the march for true disclosure. You are both always welcome on Secure Team. Thank you both again. It truly is an exciting time. And Jeremy, I'd like to end this by asking you, is there any information that you can give regarding the film, when it's coming out? When can we see it? Tell us what you got to say, buddy.
I'm going to give you that, but I'm going to give the mic to Bob for a second.
Okay.
What were we doing?
Well, I just wanted to thank you for the kind comments, and I look forward to meeting you when you come down for the premiere.
Thank you, sir. I truly look forward to meeting you too, and it was an honor to have you.
And so just about the movie, let's just get this out so everybody knows. I really, really want people to see this film. That's why I made it as an independent filmmaker. When you watch that movie and you buy it on iTunes, you buy it on Vimeo, that directly affects my life. Thank you. And Bob is making nothing off this film. He would accept nothing. I want to clear that up right away. It's only me. So if you want to see more movies from me, yes, please get the film. So you asked Tyler, I'm going to tell you, okay? So
we do. We want to see more.
Yeah, okay. Bob Lazar, Area 51, and Flying Saucers. That's the title of the movie. If you get it on iTunes, you get over 2 hours of bonus material, the most amount of bonus material. And then next up is Vimeo. You get all that bonus material too. But it's available on Amazon and all pay-per-view platforms. Just literally click the button, buy the movie, watch it, and you determine for yourself reality. Otherwise, somebody else is going to determine it for you. So that's it, man. I hope you enjoy the film. I'm really proud of this one. Celebrate with me, watch the film, and engage in the debate.
All right, so you heard it right there, guys. If you want to see this movie, I'll put all the links down below. This is a historical film. There's not going to be another one like this. And from what I've seen, Jeremy has knocked it out of the park. It's such a treat, and especially for Bob to come out after all these years, after all he's been through and putting his life back out there for the public. So let's show both of them. They're going to stand behind them. We're going to support them, support this film. We're going to watch it. It's an epic film. Thank you both for being here. I'm going to do my best to continue supporting you guys, and I hope you will both come back on very soon.
I thank you so much, Tyler.
Thank you.
Just to make it clear, Bob Lazar is not going on UFO circuits. He's not doing radio interviews. You were like literally the only one. We have rejected everybody, every publication, everything. He allowed me to make the movie. That's it, guys.
Well, you know what? I was just trying to leave a little bit of hope that he might at some point come back on. That's all it was. I know. Very private man, and it's been a treat having him.
I'm hoping that. Listen, honestly, to be candid here, I'm hoping that Bob has such a good time at this premiere that he'll come with me to a couple more theatricals, because I think it's powerful for people to see Bob and to actually hear him talk about it. So he can't be dehumanized by people. They're like, oh, that's him.
Right.
So that's my hope. But bottom line, I just want to let everybody know, stop calling me, stop asking me. It ain't happening. Bob's not doing that.
You know what?
Made the movie.
You're right. Done. You're right. Bob, that's true. You've done enough. I'm selfish. Of course, I'm going to want you back on. I'm going to want you both back on. I'm a selfish man, right. But you, Bob, especially, you have done enough. Live your life. Enjoy your life, my friend. You have done it all. Jeremy, you're on your way, man. I appreciate it, buddy. You've done great work. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tyler. Can't wait to see you at the premiere, man. Talk soon.
You too, buddy. Have a good day.
All right.
Bye.
You too.